We are going to talk about population dynamics, and this first section is going to be a general population of any living organism. Then we'll talk specifically about human dynamics in our next little section. So today we're just going to talk very generally about any living organism's population. So remember, a population is all the individuals within a certain species living in the same place at the same time. So we could be talking about all of the algae in a pond. We could be talking about all the oak trees in our forest. We could be talking about all the deer that are in Smith County. But it's all of the members of the same species in the same place at the same time. Now, this population, these individuals are going to occupy a niche. Now, a niche is the ecological role that it plays. Think of it as its job description. That includes what resources it uses, its behaviors, what it eats, what eats it. And all of these things are not only what the organism does, but also how it interacts with the rest of the environment around it. Now, when we look at organisms occupying a niche, we have two different types. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about ecology. You have generalists that can survive in a variety of environments and adjust to a variety of conditions. And then you have specialists that are adapted to a specific environment. Maybe we talked like the koala that only eats eucalyptus, or pandas that only eat bamboo. And we talked about generalists and specialists when we talked about how they are possibly more vulnerable to extinction. Your specialist, if their conditions change, if they run out of their food source or their living conditions, then that change can throw off their entire population. Whereas generalists tend to adapt a little bit better to a wide variety of conditions. Now, population density, when we look at how many individuals are in our population, we also look at how densely they are whenever we look at the area that they inhabit. So, for instance, all of the oaks in our forest, are there a few and they're very well spread out, or are they very close together and there's a lot of them, right? So it's how many individuals per area, or when we're talking like an ocean or a pond, we might talk per volume. So how many bass are in a cubic meter of water in a lake? How many deer are in an area the size of Smith County, right? Or a couple of acres. And we can get our population density to know how well that population is doing, if it's overcrowded or sparsely populated. So within this space, our organisms can be dispersed in many different ways. So we could have even, we could have clumped or random. Even could also be called uniform. So clumped would be like these starfish down here on the rock. There's a clump of them or a herd of them. Maybe think of like herds of bison in the western United States. These tend to be in little groups, and you find little groups spread around and they don't disperse very much. They tend to stay in those little clumps. Uniform would be evenly spaced. Now I have penguins on here, but think of like your predatory animals, the ones that need lots of space, that have big territories. So like lions, mountain lions, they tend to want to be alone and they tend to have a territory that they cover. So they would have more uniform dispersion, while a herd of deer would have more clumped. And then you have random. Your wildflowers, they bloom where they're planted, right? So your random could be trees and plants and things that don't move around and can't pick where they're placed. Within these populations, we not only look at how many they are, but we can look at their health and we can look at their age. How old are they? How long are they living? Are they dying off when they're very young, or are they living to a nice old age? So this will tell us whether our population is stable, whether our population is growing or even declining. And in addition to the age, we can also look at the sex ratio, how many males versus how many females in a population. And this affects our chances of mating. The females are the ones that produce the next offspring. And so if there's a whole bunch of males and not many females, then you've got a problem. Whole bunch of females, not as many males, not as big of a problem. Now, these age structure diagrams on the page over here, these are people, and we'll talk more about people age structure diagrams for different countries, but you can do the same with deer, with bass, with, trees, whatever. If you've got a forest of saplings, then your population is going to expand, because as those saplings grow and produce seeds, then they'll produce more saplings. And so you'll get that new, if they're all old and dying and snags and stuff, then your population is declining. You will hopefully have a good mix of everything. With the deer, the white-tailed deer in East Texas, they found the last several years that they had a problem with the age structure. You had too many young ones and not enough older ones. So if you are a deer hunter, if you know one, you might know that they now have a regulation where you can't take a buck that doesn't have a spread of less than 14 inches, which is, you can use like their ears as kind of a guide. They want to give those bucks a chance to grow up and mature so that they can produce more babies. If you take them all out when they're very young, then you don't get that chance to reproduce, and you don't get the big healthy bucks with the nice racks. Everyone was getting smaller and smaller antlers, prizes, trophies, whatever. And so by making a rule that they had to be a certain age for you to take them out of the population, then that helped with the population as a whole. And that's also why they have, with the sex ratio, is why they have regulations about how many bucks versus how many does. They have to keep that ratio healthy to have a healthy continuing population. And you get the same thing if you notice with like fishing regulations or any other hunting. There's regulations on gender and age, size, that you have to either put them back or avoid that. So growth rate, when we look at how a population is growing, our change in population size is the number of births subtracted out the number of deaths. So if you have more births, less deaths, then you get a positive growth, a positive population change. If you have more deaths and less births, then you have a negative population growth rate. And when we look at populations, we look at different species, we can kind of group them into different survivorship curves based on how well their young ones survive into older age. So we've got 3 types, and humans, as you can see here, we're a type 1 curve. For every 1,000 births that we have, most of them will make it to adulthood. And then as people get older, then you start dropping off in population, right? With things like birds, for every 1,000 eggs that are laid, a good number will hatch, some won't hatch. And then as they get older, they tend to get predated, right? They tend to get hunted and killed. And so you just get a steady decline as the population ages. For things like oak trees here, you might produce 1,000 acorns, but only a few of them will actually produce a tree. Then, of course, as you get older, then the trees eventually will die off. So these different types of survivorship curves have to do with per 1,000 new babies or new eggs or new seeds, how many actually survive into their age, into their adulthood and beyond. Okay, so, all right, reproductive potential. If you look at per member of the population, your reproductive potential is how many offspring each member could produce. So we'll kind of take an extreme case here. A bacteria can produce 19 million descendants in just a few days or weeks. They divide very quickly, and they reproduce often and very quickly. However, your whales have a very long gestation. They have one baby at a time. In order to produce 19 million descendants, it would take hundreds to thousands of years, right, to have that many whales produced. So that's an extreme case between the two, but your reproductive potential is higher when you produce more offspring at a time. So bacteria can produce a lot at one time, or think like trees that produce a ton of acorns, right? They have a high reproductive potential because they can produce a ton of acorns at one time. When they reproduce more often, so there's your bacteria right there, it can divide in a number of minutes or hours, and then reproduce earlier in life. They don't have to grow up and be a certain age to split and reproduce into another thing. Whales have to be not babies. They have to grow into adulthood before they can reproduce, and then they only produce one at a time. There's 2 strategies of reproduction. There's what we call K-selected and R-selected. K-selected, I think of the word kangaroo. They have one offspring at a time. They devote a lot of time and care to raising that offspring, and they spend a lot of resources on that offspring. So humans and elephants and horses, those are K-selected. They have few, but most of them survive. R-selected have very short gestational periods. They produce a lot. They don't expend many resources into caring for them. So I tend to think of the word rabbits because they have whole litters and they grow up very quickly. Spiders, tons of eggs out there, fish, frogs. They produce a lot at one time, and then it's like, good luck, fend for yourself. Hopefully you make it. So that's your K versus your R selected. Now, with your population, you can get a growth in population where it grows faster and faster and faster when you have plenty of food, space, and very little competition. That's exponential growth. You tend to get this curve, as you see down here on the bottom, where through time, your population just grows and grows and grows. Eventually, though, there is a limit, and that limit is called the carrying capacity. So the carrying capacity is where eventually it equalizes out. Your birth rates, your death rates will eventually come together, and you get a steady number of individuals in that population. That's when you get the maximum allotment of resources. If you go beyond that carrying capacity, then you end up fighting for resources. There's not enough to go around. Individuals are too close together. They get sick. They don't have enough to eat. They don't survive. And then that population shrinks back to the point where you've got enough resources. And so your population will eventually reach that limit and will stop there. It might bounce around it. But whatever resource it is that's causing that limitation, whether it's the food or the water, the sunlight, the nutrients in the soil, that's called the limiting resource. And that limiting resource, what you run out of first, determines the carrying capacity for that species. Okay, so plant, maybe there's only so much sunlight to go around in the Amazon rainforest. And so if you can get to that sunlight, you can survive. If not, you don't make it, right? So whatever resource it is that whatever resource is limited is your limiting resource. Now, with population change, through time, populations will fluctuate, right? And there's two ways that they can fluctuate, either depending on how dense their population is, so disease, crowding, overuse of resources, or there's also changes that occur no matter how big your population is. So natural disasters, flooding, earthquakes, those could be independent of the density of your population. Now, we have competition that can also limit our population. They try to use the same resources, so they compete for those. One's going to get it, one's not. And so as you get closer to that carrying capacity, you get more and more competition. Now, competition could be interspecific between different species. Maybe they want the same shelter, they want the same food, they want the same water. And so different species will compete with each other, or they could be within the same species. You could have lions competing over territory or over a food source. There's a lot of different interactions between species. Competition is just one. And when you have competition, your organisms are going after the same resources. Both of them are harmed because they're both expending energy to try to get that resource. One gets it and one doesn't. But there's also other species interactions. Predation, one is benefited because it gets a meal. The other is harmed because it is the meal. Parasitism, one is benefited. It takes from the other, which is harmed. Herbivory, a cow eating grass, the cow is benefited, the grass is dead, right? Mutualism, both are benefited, and we'll look at some examples of those as we go. Both organisms benefit from the relationship with each other. Commensalism, one is benefited, the other doesn't care. And then amensalism, one doesn't care, and the other is actually harmed by their existence. So we'll look at those interactions in greater depth on the next time we'll have an activity that we do. So there's a very quick primer into population dynamics. And next time we are together, we'll look at human populations.